I know how to. I know now how to tame a shrew. The Taming of the Shrew, 1590 to 1594. Germanus Personae. Christopher Sly, a drunken thinker. Baptista, the father of Catherine and Bianca, who negotiates with their suitors. Catherine, a strong, opinionated woman with a reputation that precedes her. Bianca, Catherine's younger sister, who is the object of affection for several suitors. Petruchio, a gentleman of Verona who travels to Padua to marry into a wealthy family. Grumio, Petruchio's servant who taunts Catherine with food when his master has forbidden her to eat. Grumio, an old wealthy man who is in love with Bianca. Hortensio, Bianca's suitor who disguises himself as the teacher Licio in order to gain access to her. Lucentio, a young man from Pisa who disguises himself as the teacher Cambio in order to woo Bianca. Vicentio, Lucentio's father who travels to Padua and is shocked to discover that another man has assumed his identity. Tranio, Lucentio's servant who pretends to be his master while his master plays the part of Cambio. Biondello, another servant to Lucentio. The fuck? A drunken tinker called Christopher Sly argues with the hostess of an alehouse and is thrown out. A passing lord and his servants trick him into believing that he is a lord and invite him to watch a play. The play is set in Italy and begins with Lucentio and his servant Tranio arriving in Padua. They overhear Baptista Minola explaining to Hortensio and Grumio, suitors to his daughter Bianca, that they cannot marry her until a husband is found for Catherine, his eldest daughter. Lucentio also falls in love with Bianca and plans to beat the other suitors for her hand in marriage. He decides to don a disguise and offer his services as her tutor, and instructs his servant Tranio to impersonate him. Hortensio's friend Petruchio arrives in Padua and declares his intention to marry a woman with a large dowry. Hortensio suggests Catherine Minola, and Petruchio determines to woo, win, and wed her despite her shrewish reputation. Petruchio comes to woo Catherine, presents Licio, Hortensio, and disguises a music master for the sisters. Hortensio will attempt to woo Bianca while Petruchio secures his marriage to her sister. Grumio and Lucentio disguise the Cambio to woo on his behalf, while Tranio, already disguised Lucentio, continues to woo Bianca for his master. After a lively exchange of words with Catherine, Petruchio confirms his intention to marry her and a date is set for the wedding. The wedding party is kept waiting due to Petruchio's late arrival, but when he appears, his clothing does not befit the occasion. Petruchio then declares that he and his wife will not attend the wedding dinner, but return to his home immediately. Petruchio denies his wife food and sleep in an attempt to tame her shrewish behavior. Having revealed his true identity, Lucentio wins Bianca's heart, leaving Hortensio to marry a widow. Lacking funds, Lucentio and Tranio convince a merchant to imitate Lucentio's father, Vicentio. All is well until Lucentio's real father arrives and bemused to meet the impostor. The confusion is explained by Lucentio. As Catherine and Petruchio return to Padua for a banquet, Catherine obeys Petruchio's commands. Petruchio wagers that his wife will prove more obedient than both Lucentio and Hortensio's wives. When the men call for their wives to attend to them, only Catherine appears. Petruchio wins the wager. Catherine speaks forcefully to the other women about what is expected of a good wife and the nature of the relationship between husband and wife. The guests are left surprised by Catherine's transformation. In context, themes: love, marriage, power, fathers, daughters, money, status, men, women. Setting: Warwickshire, England, Padua, Italy. Sources: 10th century. Christopher Sly's story shares similarities with the tale from the Arabian Nights, while the tale of the shrewish woman takes inspiration from ballads and folk stories of the period. 1566. The plot involving Bianca, Lucentio, Hortensio, and Grumio is based on George Castiglione's comedy Supposes. Legacy: 1611. John Fletcher writes The Woman's Prize or The Tamer Tamed as a response to Shakespeare's play. 1874. Hermann Gietz writes an opera based on the play called Der Widerspannstigen Zandmug, 1929. First Shakespeare talkie directed by Sam Taylor, with Hollywood stars Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks, 1948. Cole Porter's musical adaptation titled Kiss Me Kate is first performed. 1967. Franco Savarelli's film starring Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor is released. 1999. U.S. teen movie 10 Things I Hate About You based on the play is set in a Seattle high school. Some critics may wish that Shakespeare had never written The Taming of the Shrew. There are actresses today who would not want to be cast as Catherine, and theater reviewers who would prefer to see the play disappear from the stage. Others, however, would include the play in their list of favorite Shakespearean comedies and identify Catherine as one of the playwright's most memorable early creations. In his presentation of The Taming of a Shrew, Shakespeare gave voice to a variety of attitudes towards women and marriage that were common in his time. Such attitudes are more likely to offend and entertain contemporary audiences, but they reflect the playwright's engagement with the period in which he was living. At this time, a woman could be described as shrewish if she openly agreed with a man or seemed bad-tempered. The very title of Shakespeare's play promised drama and extreme behavior. It also promised a battle of the sexes. The property of men. Women are often spoken about in this play as commodities owned by men. Catherine's first utterance is one of disgust to hear in the way in which her father speaks of her to Gremio and Hortensio, underlining her father's financial interest in her marital status. Financial gain is the first thing that occurs to Petruchio when he accepts the challenge of wooing Catherine. I come to wive it wealthily in Padua, if wealthily then happy in Padua. Act 1, Scene 2, lines 74 to 75. Love does not enter his thoughts, although he clearly has sex in mind. For I will board her, though she chat as loud as thunder when the clouds nod and crack. Act 1, Scene 2, lines 94 and 95. It is clear that Catherine, who is thought of by the men as a fiend of hell, Act 1, Scene 1, line 88, will be turned into a gentler, milder mold. Act 1, Scene 1, line 60. The question remains whether the transformation will be consensual. Have I not in my time heard lions roar at Petruchio, Act 1, Scene 2? Taming tactics. Shakespeare's Petruchio rehearses taming strategy through soliloquy before meeting Catherine. Say that she rail, why then I'll tell her plain. She sings as sweetly as a nightingale. Say that she frowns, I'll say she looks as clear as morning roses newly washed with dew. Say she be mute and will not speak a word, then I'll commend her volubility, and say she uttereth piercing eloquence. Act 2, Scene 1, lines 170 through 176. Without recourse to the soliloquy, Petruchio's behavior would seem eccentric and insensitive. While this soliloquy does not excuse his conduct, including withholding food and denying sleep, it serves to emphasize that he is donning a role to achieve a desired result. As the couple make their way to the banquet at the close, Petruchio's reign over Catherine is apparent. He has essentially talked her in some production, beaten her into submission. He treats her, in his own words, like a falcon, shaping her appetites to suit his will. Petruchio's treatment of Catherine is ruthless, and contrasts strongly with the farcical romantic subplot in which Bianca is besieged by starry-eyed suitors. Petruchio does not seem interested in having the love as well as the obedience of his wife. Catherine is bewildered by his behavior and angered that he does it under the name of perfect love. Why, there's a wench. Come on and kiss me, Kate. Petruchio, Act 5, Scene 2. At the close of the play, Catherine performs the role of Petruchio's perfect wife, appearing at his command and echoing his words in her final speech to the women at the banquet. Thy husband is thy lord, thy life, thy keeper, thy head, thy sovereign, one that cares for thee, and for thy maintenance commits his body to painful labor both by sea and land, and craves no other tribute at thy hands, but love, fair looks, and true obedience, too little payments for so great a debt. Whether or not the plans enjoy is open to interpretation. There have been productions where Kates and Petruchios have left the stage arm in arm into a happy future together. But there have also been those left staring at one another in stony silence. Shrewish women. In the 16th century, a woman had to do little more than challenge a man's opinion to be termed a shrew. She might be labeled shrewish if she spoke too much or appeared mean-spirited or sexually promiscuous. There were many ballads and folk tales about unruly wives that Shakespeare could have based his presentation of Catherine around. Here is a verse of a ballad called The Cruel Shrew. She never lends her brawling, her tongue it is so loud, but always shall be railing and will not be controlled. For she the breeches will wear, although it breeds my strife. If I were now a bachelor, I'd never have a wife. Punishments in the 16th century for being thought shrewish were brutal. Women could be forced to wear a horrific metal device called a scold's bridle. This fit over the woman's head and pushed a metal plate into her mouth to hold down her tongue. Having silenced his wife, a husband could tie a rope around her neck and parade her in front of his neighbors.